Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the 43rd episode of Retuning Your Firm. If you're not familiar with the theme, what we're really saying is that when you're in a tough situation, when you're in a storm, do you just cover your car with a tarpaulin, or do you actually take the time to retune it for everything that needs to happen? And that includes not just the car, of course, but the driver. And also, you need to kind of know what the weather's like, in other words, the environment. So when you go back on that track, you are in tip top condition. So, what are we talking about today? What are the sort of themes that we're going to be covering today? Well, I'd like to go through that with you. First of all, misbehaving partners, which is an interesting topic. We're doing a poll today. I looked at a poll that was done 10 years ago. It'd be fascinating to see if the results are any different. I suspect they're not, but it's a very big topic. And as you'll learn shortly, it's one that we're covering in our US group next week, which is why we're doing it today for them. Awesome. We're also looking at business development and what have we learned over the last year? And lastly, looking at digital trends and a very provocative title from Derek, which is called The Death of Legal Tech. So who's on today? Well, as I mentioned, Derek. Derek is the founder and CEO of Hyperscale Group. He was for, I think, about 20 years. He'll probably correct me on that. Very much not just a partner, but the lead partner on all matters technology at what was Rags and then changed its name through Gowling WLG, I think is its current name. So hugely influential, one of the top people driving that. And if he says that we are heading for the death of something, it'll be really interesting to find out why he thinks that way. Is it just another Richard Susskind? Who knows? Bernard Savage. Bernard, again, has a really interesting blue chip background in the marketing world and has been working in a really interesting firm called Size 10 and a half Boots. And in the real world conferences, he usually comes along with some of them as well, which is quite an interesting fashion statement. Jeremy Beard, again, Jeremy, welcome back. I know you missed us a couple of weeks ago, so you've not been on for a month. So it'll be interesting to hear how things have been moving forward at your 25, about 300 strong accountancy firm. And of course, Francesca, our anchor tenant, going to be missing you. I think it's in next week. Wow. But I think you've got some really interesting trip, which we'll hear about shortly. And of course, yours truly, as host, Richard Chaplin, the founder and chief executive of the Managing Partners Forum. So that's our lineup for today. And if you may remember, for those of you who were on last week, we had Andrew Mayo talking about the whole area of developing leaders and leadership. And we heard from Tim Vorley about the innovation through design sprints and what's going on in that world. And Ruprecht saying that culture is not just a soft but a hard economic factor. All of those and another 100 or so slots are available in the forum, public domain. Just go to the Reaching Your Firm page, go to the bottom, choose a keyword, choose a speaker, whichever, it's up to you, and help yourself. And we're getting about 600 to 700 people doing that every month, which is really interesting. So keep coming back. So looking forward to adding another couple today with Derek and with Bernard. So let's just run through what's the underlying background. What are we actually focusing on here? What's today all about? Well, first of all, you've got to think big. You've actually got to, as Lewis Carroll say, believe 6 impossible things before breakfast. You've got to think small. You've got to focus on some angles that resonate with your key audiences. Now that's something that is that think big, think small. Keep those two in balance. If you're rushing, if it's all big, you probably have a problem. If it's all small, then nobody's going to notice you. So keep those two in balance. That's really important. And we'll talk a bit more about relationships and their importance in making sure that clients come to you, even if the work may be a bit sort of pedestrian or compliance driven. They still want to come with you because of the relationships. I think we'll pick that a bit later. But relationships are about reciprocity. It's no good just having an address book. It's got to be, where do we create the win-win? How can we help our clients, or our people for that matter, with their problems? And we'll talk a little bit about that. If you recall, the poll today is to looking at people who are underperforming. Usually that's a question in many ways of the communication having got to a bad place. Because if you can nip these things in the bud, it typically doesn't grow into the sort of what is often called bad apple syndrome, spreading across the place. Think about doing a campaign. We're in episode 43 here. We've got a great group of people who seem to come on every week, which is amazing. We love you to bits. That's an audience. It's not just an audience, it's a community. It's people who kind of feel, yeah, I watch this. I loved the email that went out from Bernard and Derek, more or less saying, I got the call to go on the show today. It's amazing. That's fantastic. Thank you, guys. Drop convention. Go for new ideas and services, because at the end of the day, you can't just do the same old, same old. And again, I think Derek will probably be picking that up in his talk shortly. Think about speed. What's holding you back? Is it complacency? Or what? You've got to get there, but don't just rush off. Articulate your assumptions first. Well, as accountants know perfectly well that if you change the accounting policies, otherwise known as the assumptions, you change the profit. And it's exactly the same. If you're not clear what the assumptions are when you're setting out in a new path, how will you know when they prove invalid? So articulate them. And when you launch, what you're really doing is market testing your assumptions. And when they prove invalid, I've written if, but it's really when, because all experiments fail. That's normal. When they prove invalid, then you need to amend and pivot. And that depersonalizes it. All too often, two partners will fight over, oh, it's my idea. But actually, hang on, no, it's not. It's about a project, and you may have different views as to the assumptions. And that's fine. Let's find out which of you in the market proves to have the accurate assumptions. Much more interesting conversation. Roger Martin drives that one. Brilliant stuff. So be entrepreneurial, keep listening and innovating. And in all honesty, the most important word in that sentence is listening. If you're not listening, forget it. You're not listening to your clients, your service won't be aligned. If you're not listening to your people, you will end up with underperformance. They'll leave you. All other horrible things will happen. So just remember to keep listening. So important. And I'd like to thank Elena Globset goes back to April of 2020. I use it every week. It's just a brilliant backdrop, because every time these issues come through in our conversations, and it's right that they should. So what's going up in the forum? I mentioned we're doing the dealing with underperforming or misbehaving partners. If you can't read this on a small screen, don't worry. It's all on the website. And that's our North American group. Lovely group. You've got a lot of people who are signing up for that. So really genuinely transatlantic forum, which is fantastic. And Fast Track Innovation, which is the following week, where we're looking at this 2-year study that the government's funded around the importance of design thinking to help you address, reframe, and resolve your business challenges, which is a really interesting area. It's the future of innovation, effectively. So what are we doing? Well, the other thing we're doing is culture. I mean, last week we had a really fascinating meeting of managing partners, firm-wide leaders, we call them, and we were looking at culture. And I've seldom come to the topic that we had 15 or 20 people on the call, and everybody was being really open and honest. And the underlying message was, we haven't a clue what's coming up next. This is our legacy. We've got this massive property. It's maybe 50% used. Yeah, we can send out leadership updates all the time, but our people need to interact. And guess what? There's only 2 places they can interact: face to face, but that's quite a lot of money. I mean, you think about it, you're spending £1,000 per employee per month, which is about £60 per square foot, which is the number we normally use, but that's what the numbers mean if you talk to the finance function. And it could be 50% underutilized, not a very good use of your asset. Or you could go online, a lot less expensive, but most of them are rather clunky. There's one that isn't, which is called Remo. And we've actually developed, as I think you're probably aware, a unique, secure, private, confidential 24/7 intra-lounge. And that's a word we've trademarked because I invented it. In Remo, unlimited video, multiple floor plans, up to 800 people for a really not a huge amount of money. And when I say floor plans, just have a look at that. This is what we've found. We've actually had designed for us the most amazing 3D plan. Absolutely phenomenal. And not just one hall, but 2. So you've got another one where you can have a sort of partner lounge where people can just chill out. So watch the campus grow is what we say there. So that's something we think is going to help firms. And this is really where the technology brings a whole new dimension to the historic. We've got to have an office to actually, we need an online presence. And Jeremy's firm, who's on today, did actually help us there by doing a trial of this, what we're doing, which is amazing. So thank you, Jeremy, for that. So let's go on to polls, because that's obviously where we want to spend some good time today. For those of you who haven't been on the call before, those that haven't done the polls, this is a quote from government. And I know it's true because one time we were a day late in sending them the findings. So they asked me where they were, which is my definition of thought leadership. So your polls are incredibly important. And it's not just government. We emerged in a House of Lords report back in October, looking at the future of UK-EU relationships, which was an interesting topic. What did they say? Well, they said a lot in the report. To us, what was interesting was we were the only poll they used that wasn't government stats. And there were lots of other people who contributed to that, believe me. So these polls are going out. I was with them. We did one on professionalism recently, and I was sitting down with Lord Grimstone, who's the minister, and a couple of others. And we were looking through how can we actually use professionalism to actually promote our sector, particularly around international trade, but not exclusively. So these are genuinely being used. So please contribute. It's kind of my short-term message. What happened? What did we do last week? We looked at the monthly trends. This, if you can see it, the blue is expansion, and we go back to Boris Bounce of February. Last week, we had 90% of people, you may remember if you did it, 90% of people said they were looking to expand, of firms, and 0 said they were looking to contract. And the difference was the people who are staying the same. So after this kind of, we had various images, Francesca will remember as we went along, we had the sort of, the thing you grab the sausages with and the barbecue, and then it kind of went into something a bit more complex. But the truth is that we are looking at a very upbeat sector at the moment, and that's as true for income, where if you think about it, we will go back to the purple back in April, 50% of you thought you'd have a 30% plus dip, and that's now nil. And the people who thought there was none is almost 100%. And the same thing happens if you look at the flow of new work. The same thing happens if you're looking at the headcount. So there's just, everybody is just really feeling positive. And it's not just, and it curiously, where does it start? It starts with the vaccine. Once the announcement came out that we had an effective vaccine, which was around about November, those numbers just suddenly shot off in a different direction. And they've been building month on month. And of course, there isn't, unfortunately, as we know as accountants, 100% is as far as you can go. So I think we're probably going to plateau now, but hey, that's not the point. It just shows exactly what a weird year we've just all been through. Thank you all for contributing. In terms of the statements that are being true for the firm, again, and Bernard will love this, the light blue is marketing and BD. That was down in the pack going back a few months ago. It's now the clearest thing. That's what's actually true. Moving on as well, we've also got the areas that carry weight. The same comment applies. What about the priorities? What are the things that people are actually saying are priority to them? Well, operational efficiency, pretty much always up there. That's the light blue. It zigzags around. Developing a clear purpose and strategy, developing skills, increasing tech is a slightly darker one. Differentiating the brand is the blue one. Actually, there aren't that many changes there over the last year, I don't think. Those are broadly the top 5 things that people are seeing as important. And in terms of what's getting in the way, well, this is really where you're into the thing that really matters, because the purple is, unfortunately, the financial health of our client base. And that was nowhere a year ago. That wasn't even on the list. I wouldn't even thought of included it as an option. We just didn't think that way. It's up there, and that with the poor economic climate. So are we being a little bit myopic? Are we actually, as Derek will be pointing out, unaware of what's going on round about us? Are we not preparing for the storm? Are we genuinely retuning our firm? We're very optimistic. We're very positive. Our priorities haven't fundamentally shifted, but there's some things happening out there which could come along and take us in a less than positive context. Who knows? Hard to say. So let's just pick up the last 2 points, if I may. So what's been going on in terms of people working from home? Not quite straight lines, but quite close. In other words, yeah, there is a general acceptance that the little blue thing right at the bottom, everybody's working in the office. No, 0. The light blue at the top, everybody's working from home. Well, it's gone up a little bit recently, but it's generally around about the 20% mark. And then the others kind of fall in between. There is a magic number, a bit like 42 in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. The magic number here is 2.7. I can't prove it, but it seems to be emerging all over the place. People will, on average, be spending 2.7 days a week in the office. Now, that could be chunked in terms of 1 week on, 1 week off. That's an area we talked about a lot last week. But there's absolutely a lot of people who are thinking about that area. And of course, that has implications on the property. Now, if we're into growth mode, then we will arguably be able to need less property. But some of you may have read in the FT this week, PwC is spending £75 million reconverting their offices to make them more of social spaces. And I think a lot of firms are looking seriously at that. How do we use our £1,000 per square foot per employee space more efficiently? Growth will absorb some of that, obviously, but there's going to be a lot of people, and we've had the property people, and the light grey, the sort of, I'm not really good at colours, but the sort of light greeny colour, is the people who think it's 20%, maybe 30% less space that they'll be needing. And, we as an organisation don't have an office anymore. So, hey, that's an example. So that's a little bit of interesting there. So let's just talk a little bit about today's poll. I'll come in and show you myself now for a change. We're going to be talking about misbehaving partners. or underperformance, I think possibly is another term that's slightly more common. I rather like misbehaving. I think it's an American word, but I love it. So let's go through it quickly because I really don't have much time now. It's pretty clear that personal revenues are the number one metric used by firms. So let me just so I can see you. That the underperform the actual formal reviews are about annually. Quite a lot can happen in a year. 3 to 6 hours per partner. That's all basic stuff. None of those. Well, about 2/3 of you have got some of those trends. Only 36% had none of them. So some of them it's slimming down. Some of them it's lackluster performance. The biggest one is that partners are out of sync, out of gear with where the firm is going. So there's certainly 2/3 of you got some of that going on in terms of partner reduction trends, I think I called it. In terms of realistic targets, well, 10% think none. Fair enough. I'm very positive about your firms, but then between 1 to 5 and 6 to 10, that's where people think that's realistic target. And where are they at the moment? Well, 4% of you are none. That's nice and honest. Thank you. 14% are in the 10 to 15%. You have a major management issue there, and 1 to 5 is probably kind of standard stuff. But the 50% of you that are more than between 6 and 15%, that's where I think we're really going to start looking as to why. Why underperformance? Personal problems is the number one, very clearly. Looking through that. Fear of failure comes through number second, and that's quite interesting given the current context. You'll get all this information, by the way, next week, so that's all good fun. In terms of the most popular options, development and training, and as we've heard on so many of these things, when somebody is failing, you do not send them on a training course, because usually the reason they're failing is because they haven't been clear, at least because the goals that they have been set aren't clear enough, and therefore they are failing to achieve those goals. So that's quite interesting, I think. Reinvigorating, voluntary, and 14% expulsion. That's quite interesting. Most people see that as a nuclear option, so that's quite interesting. In terms of which statements are true, these are all the good things, by the way. Now, we're only talking about 18% who are looking at the true cost of partner performance, 14% thinking about de-equitizing, 43% have got a comprehensive management system. The only one that actually has 50% of you is partners having clear targets. There's a lot of people there who could be doing some good things. And now we come to the less good practices. Failing to expectations, that's a quarter of you. Financial metrics alone for performance metrics, a third. Poor performance is tolerated over a long period, and as any psychologists will know, that's not a good place, etc., etc. So we're looking here at room for improvement, I think is the elegant expression. So on which happy note, I will leave this poll. Thank you very much for contributing. It's been fascinating. One of the more interesting ones we've done, I think. And I will invite Derek to come and give us his thoughts for today. Over to you, sir.
Thanks, Richard. So Derek Southall, founder of Hyperscale Group, and I'm here today to talk to you about the death of legal tech and why conventional legal tech operating platforms are increasingly going to struggle in a digital world. So the first thing to emphasize is this is not about particular systems. This is really about the operating platform. We've got some of the great systems out there, but I think they're going to struggle for 5 reasons. Point number one about productivity. Okay, so the typical model within a law firm is you've got a PMS, document and email management system. If you're lucky, a bit of case and matter and a bit of CRM. That model, first of all, is 25 to 30 years old. Okay, a huge amount has happened in the last few years, and we're still operating fundamentally to the same model. Secondly, all of those systems aren't really legal tech, but they manage information. Okay, there's very little legal in them. So the reality of it is, what we've got here is systems that we've got an $800 billion plus legal market. Virtually most of the output of that market is still done by humans that store information in these systems. These systems aren't adding a huge amount to productivity. And the third bit is, many of these systems, actually, we're seeing this huge changes in demand, and many of these systems are quite rigid. You need specialized developers. They're not no code. So again, they're not perhaps agile enough for what people need. So that's challenge number one. Challenge number two, I think, is cost of ownership. And this is what I'm increasingly hearing back from clients. You need these systems, you need to organize your information, but there's lots of other things a law firm needs to do now. They need to do more on productivity, more on security, more on client interfaces. And people are struggling with the cost of these systems. And the fact that they're best of breed and there's multiple vendors makes that even harder. So again, that's increasingly becoming a problem. And that's a reflection of the other things firms need to invest in. Third challenge, I think, is interoperability. So if you take a view that legal tech hasn't pushed out, okay, we're fundamentally organizing information. We're not doing much on the productivity or the legal delivery. You've seen the growth of prop tech, construction tech, death tech, and all of these things have got their own platforms that law firms are going to have to engage with. So to paint a picture, in the world of property, if due to government actions or property or blockchain, you're going to see, let's imagine you see all property transactions being done on one or two platforms with algorithmic valuations and auto finance settlement. How are your systems going to interface with that? What is your data flow going to be like? How are you going to have control of your data? Are your people going to be re-entering? And if you've got these rigid systems in the middle, that's going to be really, really challenging. Most law firms have got multiple products and multiple practice areas to deal with. So that's going to get really difficult. On top of that, we're seeing some great solutions hit the market, whether it be AI solutions, playbook solutions. You can't have a situation where your fee earners are going out of your main system, entering data into these systems because A, it's inefficient. Secondly, you've got no control of your security or your data. So again, the rigidity of these systems and the fact that they focus on set areas, again, is going to become increasingly challenging. Fourth point, I think, is Microsoft 365. So we've seen, many people thought Microsoft 365 or Office 365, as it used to be known, was just the online version of Office products from Microsoft. Anybody who looks into this for more than 5 minutes realizes it's not. Microsoft, massive business, 125 billion turnover. There is a huge capability coming down the track with the MS365 stack. It's got digital dictation, it's got an embedded e-disclosure system, it's got embedded RPA systems in Power Automate. It's got, the list goes on. Now, we do a lot of work for corporates, and what we've seen, the second corporates have implemented MS365, they've looked at their entire tech stack, looked at the capability, and a lot of software has gone, so they've diminished the tech stack. So they've ended up saying, we're going to be SAP for finance, MS365 for operations, and we're going to be Salesforce for sales. And the tech stack has got massively reduced. Are we going to start seeing that with law firms? I suspect we might, because again, the sheer capability and the value you're getting back from 365, I think, is going to challenge this market. We are definitely going to see some changes. And the final point, Richard talked about this, COVID has caused some complete differences in how in our workforce. We're going to see a talent anywhere. We're going to see people working in the office, out of the office, agile, a whole range of different models. The tech market actually has responded well to COVID. It's kept people up and running, but it's also exposed. We've got gaps in KM, we've got gaps in process, gaps in supervision, gaps in social. And again, this course tech stack has got to adapt and change to be able to rectify these modern day problems. So in summary, we are going through this period of unprecedented change. More's happened in this market in the last 5 years than the 20 before, and COVID's accelerated that. What we've got now and how we operate isn't going to be enough. There's got to be some change, and it might be something more. It might be this missing middle, this magic sauce. But to succeed and deal with digitization, we need more than we've got now. Thank you. Richard.
Sorry about that. Yeah. No, I'll now call on Bernard to talk us through his view. Thank you for that. Bye.
Thank you, Richard. It's only taken me 16 years to get the phone call from you, so I'm delighted to be here. And as anyone that knows me will tell you, I don't give up. So there we go. What I'd like to do is just give you a summary of what we see at Side 10.5 Boots has happened over the last 12 months from a business development perspective and what lessons we've learned over that time. if we can cast our minds back to 12 months ago, I think we were all blindsided. I think that the combination of uncertainty, unfamiliarity of working from home, and fear gripped us. And what that meant was that business development was relegated. What we soon realized, probably, I don't know, 8 weeks or so in, was that actually our clients had issues, that it simply wasn't possible to relegate BD. We had to adapt our approach. And what we saw initially was a response in 3 areas. We saw a proliferation of content. We saw people start to take LinkedIn a little bit more seriously. And the third thing, shock horror, was we rediscovered the telephone. That's for those of us that weren't making a Zoom video conference calls. That was great. That was kind of the knee-jerk reaction. What's happened subsequently is we've become a little bit more sophisticated through a combination, I would say, of 2 things. Firstly, through what I would call Zoomitis. There's been that many Zoom calls that it's now much harder to get people's attention and get them to dial in. So we've had to be more sophisticated and look at alternatives. And secondly, I think there's a realization now, and Derek and Richard have both touched on this within their own thoughts, is that the toothpaste is out the tube. It's not going back. Things will never be the same as they were before. And actually, from a BD perspective, some of the things we're doing now, I would argue, are smarter, they're more cost effective, and they're what we should be doing irrespective of a vaccine and going back to the office or whatever. So what I'd like to do is just focus in on 5 key areas where I think we've learned some lessons over the last year. First one, client development. What we've seen is that it simply isn't enough to send out generic emails saying that, we care about you, what I call COVID washing. What we've seen is that actually those firms that have succeeded in the last 12 months have actually been a little bit more savvy. They've been more, the communications have been personal, and they've had a more structured approach to client development. Second area is content. In the early days, we were seeing lots of stuff, mostly pretty dull, anodyne stuff about, as I say, COVID washing. But what we've seen in more recent months is actually, rather than a reliance simply on the written word, we're seeing increasingly the use of audio through podcasts. We're seeing more video content, infographics. We're seeing personalized video messages, and there may even be somebody on this call who got a personal video, a Christmas message from me because I was too mean to buy any Christmas cards. But that's certainly an area of change. The third area is presentations. Now, up until last March, my normal working week was 4 days out of 5. I was on the road giving talks in person, and I'll be the first one to admit that it's been quite a steep learning curve for me delivering presentations virtually, because the thing that I found out is you simply can't do what you did in person and deliver it in the same way online. You need to do something differently. Now, we don't have time now to get into the detail of that, but it does require a difference in approach. And then there's networking, isn't there? I mean, who misses the canapes? Who misses the rank wine? I know I don't. And actually, rather than it be harder to get contact with people, I would argue it's actually easier now. The geographical barriers are simply not there because we can use Zoom or one of the other video conference platforms. And actually, we're starting now to see that people as human beings rather than as name badges. And my experience has been we're having better conversations with people, getting to know people better. And I think that's a good thing. And then fifthly, search engine optimization. There's no getting away from the fact that people's buying habits have changed. Online is of increasing importance. And the nature of SEO is that it is dynamic. So it isn't going to be enough to pay lip service to SEO. It requires ongoing management. So what does that mean going forwards? What does the future look like? Well, I don't have a crystal ball, but I've got a few thoughts, which I'll share with you in about 45 seconds. What are those thoughts? I think we're going to see more client contact. I think we're going to see more informality. I think we're going to see greater use of video, greater use of podcasts. I think we're going to see more collaboration. The pandemic has taught us the interdependencies that exist. And I think there's a lot more scope to have more collaborative relationships with business partners. And that's a good thing. And it's more cost effective too. And finally, I think there is no getting away from the fact, and I agree with what Derek's been saying, that technology is something we all have to, we shouldn't be frightened of. We need to raise the bar. We all need to become more adept, myself included. As confident as I am on the stage, I'm not as confident when it comes to technology. Even I've learned over the last year, and it isn't something to be scared of. Thank you for your attention. If you want more of the details behind this, there's a lot more data in the reports. Either get that from Richard or ask me on LinkedIn and I'll send you the full report. Thank you for your attention.
Excellent. And look forward to following up with that conversation. Francesca, if I could perhaps bring you in here now, and sort of what are your thoughts from what you've heard today?
Excited to join in now, and you can hear my dog merrily barking in the background, bang on cue. There were two fantastic talks there, and maybe I could just pick up on a couple of things for each. One, I'm just jealous, Bernard, of the name of your business. I think it's far more interesting than Grant Thornton. I love that name. But let's start with tech, because I think, Derek, that was a really passionate view about how firms just need to get alive to the challenges of tech and see it as an enabler rather than as a curse. And I know we were talking in the green room just before this conversation about how slow sometimes professional service firms can be to embrace how tech can be used to make the changes that need to happen to stay competitive, but also to offer a much better service to clients, because you don't want to spending all your time on things that could be automated. You want to be spending your time on added value. So I think there's a lot that we need to learn around that, and we are often very slow in our profession to embrace change. We very often sort of fight against it. We're concerned about how it might impact on different areas of our business, and we run the real risk of other competitors coming into a market that might not be professional service firms at all, coming in and taking over some of those areas because we haven't moved sufficiently. And our clients will judge the things that are really price sensitive, that are commoditized on price, that they'll value the established relationships where they want a relationship. So I think we just need to be smart around that. So lots I took from that piece. And Bernard, I just love the COVID approach. How many emails have I received that were just like the one you talked about? People perhaps not thinking further than the veneer front of what they need to do. And I think the last few months, if it's taught us anything, is that authenticity counts. Because if all you do is just pump out something a bit bland, be that internal or external, and you haven't thought through the implications, people just see through that. And the other piece of COVID is sometimes people have had a little bit more time to look at those things and go, that just isn't working for me. So I hope people will take some of those 5 points to hand. There you go, Richard.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And Jeremy, welcome back. And from the sort of what I call managing partner perspective, are there some points you've heard today that really resonate for you?
Yes, thank you, Richard. Good morning, everyone, and nice to be back. I guess the thing that was most close and resonates with me and made me shiver slightly was the survey on partner performance, having in the last 2 months completed 38 partner reviews. And shall we say, I did tick the box of 3 to 6 hours, and if you multiply that out, that's quite a lot of work over the last couple of months, but very important. But I think certainly I have a long list of things, of areas where I think we can improve our processes. I was interested to note on the survey the prominence of financial performance and the prominence of individual financial performance. And that's certainly something that, to an extent, we are trying to get away from. So still very important, absolutely. It's what drives the business and drives a lot of people to be in the business. But there are a number of other factors we feel at the moment around being an owner of a business, which of course is what partners are. So we are trying to develop that and certainly take away the tremendous influence there has been in the past on the financial metrics. And I would also add there, obviously, our regulators are obviously keen to see changes around that as well. And certainly within the audit profession, we are seeing a real push on the importance of audit quality, and the regulators are very keen to ensure that that features highly within a partner performance, partner appraisal process. So that was something that I took away. I will just give you a plug, Richard, for Remo. You mentioned that we'd used it, and certainly it was really good from a staff point of view, and it's something that we're not using at the moment, but I think we would like to revisit. Certainly helps to engage people socially, and I suspect there's an opportunity with clients as well in that regard. And yeah, I very much liked some of Bernard's comments. Rediscovering the telephone. It's very easy for us to hide behind emails, but I think certainly over the last 12 months, what's kept us connected with our clients is picking up the telephone to them, and that's been really crucial. I think it's really made us look at some of our other marketing activities. We get much more much better attendance of webinars than we would have done from seminars in the office previously. So we're managing to spread the net much more widely, and getting more engagement at that level. And that at an individual level, I think we've been pretty successful in staying in touch with our clients by actually picking up the phone to them, rather than previously we'd have probably just hidden behind emails a little bit. So those were probably my initial thoughts. Richard, thank you.
Oh, thanks a million. Derek, just going back to your, your passion, I think was the word that was used. What do you attribute this to? You said that, things haven't sort of changed over 25 years. I mean, is that structural? In other words, that it's a bit like, I don't know, Marconi years ago, they could predict 4 years out when it was going to go bust because there was nothing that the non-exec directors could do to stop it. In other words, is it something that's that sort of structural? Is it because maybe people are making so much money that they don't see the burning platform? Or are they just unaware of what's going on outside their small pool of light, using the Herbert Simon analogy? What do you attribute it to?
Yeah, and a good question. I think there's two or three things. I think the one being, if you're rolling out a piece of technology and it's generic, let's imagine a document management system. You could have 4 people rolling out something that benefited 1,200. The more you get under the skin of legal work, the more you end up then with 1,200 projects that benefit 4 people. So it's difficult, I think, is the first point. Secondly, you're working with, to get under the skin and improve productivity, you're working with lawyers. Some lawyers have got the brain for this, others haven't. Lawyers are very committed to their clients. So if the client demand comes in, you don't see them. It's really, really hard. And I think the fundamental problem is also, in a way, is law firms are too small. And I don't mean that in a negative sense, but to really improve the productivity in some of these areas, you need some real volumes. And law firms have got lots of products. Lots of, Apple has got 8 products. Law firms have probably got 2,000 products out there, basically. So there lies the challenge. It's hard, and what the suppliers have done really is done some of the easier things, but have probably not really got onto the difficult stuff.
Francesca, how much does this death of legal tech apply to accountancy? Is there an accountancy tech which is also under threat, do you think?
Yeah, well, I think that's been the situation for quite a long time, that the need to keep moving forward is often slower in professional services firms. So if you look back even 10, 15 years ago, most accountants were very compliance orientated. That was pretty much all they did. And that was a hugely needed service, but so much of that is automated now. And in the field that I specialized in, which was tax, now you can actually get your tax return software straight off the HMRC website. So you actually found that a lot of the work that high street accountants really relied on disappeared. And the smart accountants had moved way before then. They'd gone, actually, this isn't where we're going to make our money. This will be the low margin, high volume, commoditized work. So let's automate that as much as we can. And let's really concentrate on building a great relationship with our client, because there may be other work to do, or we'll just get more volume. Either of those models can work. because otherwise they would have been defunct. And if you go, I think the sort of more recent examples, you go to somewhere like New Zealand, where bookkeeping was the absolute staple of most high street accountants. Xero came in with its quick, easy to use software and wiped out a lot of that market, not quite overnight, but in a really quick period of time. So those who had seen the trend, adapted accordingly, survived. Those who hadn't just found the market completely went away. And I think that's the rule of the dinosaur, isn't it? You work before the meteor hits or the climate changes.
And staying with clients, Bernard, a lot of what the business development is about is necessarily driven by clients. I mean, that's a statement of the obvious, and the point that Francesca was making about relationships. Going back to your 5 points, I mean, to what extent do you see these as strengthening client relationships?
I think in many respects, relationships, those people that have adapted, those people that have picked up the phone, those people that have engaged one-on-one with their clients, I think are in a stronger position now. I think they have more insight, which should then inform what they do next in terms of service delivery. And I think, one of the things I've advocated 16 years I've been doing what I'm doing now is that people should be having a structured one-on-one contact with their clients outside of open client files. But I think now, because people have been forced to do it, I think that's what we're going to see. And that doesn't require significant investment in IT. That is about actually taking personal responsibility to contact people and to have conversations with them. So I think that there has been a tendency within the professions for what I call checkbook marketing, for solicitors and accountants to abdicate responsibility and think that because they've installed a CRM system or because they've got an in-house marketing department, that doesn't require them to actually take personal responsibility to invest in relationships. The two things are quite different. Marketing should sit alongside business development, but business development should be owned, in my opinion, by fee earners.
And Jeremy, we talked a bit about underperformance in the poll, and you mentioned that you just spent and working it out 100 hours or something like that, talking to your partners, perhaps more. If you went till 6, it would be 200. To what extent does, in all honesty, client feedback and quality of client relationships count when you're assessing performance, in your experience?
Yeah, I mean, it's very important. I suppose how you measure that is a bit more challenging. So, we often run client satisfaction surveys, and that gives some information. But I'm probably slightly contradicting what I said earlier. I guess the financial performance of an individual partner is a reasonably good yardstick for their relationship with their clients and how that is going. So, it's very important. Sometimes difficult to measure. We do get feedback from our managers about partners as well, and they're often in the best place to comment on the relationship with clients that the partner may have, and they're very open and honest about that. So that's all all part of it, and a very important aspect.
Derek, if I may kind of now perhaps talk to you wearing your partner in a law firm, which for many years you were before Hyperscale was set up. I mean, to what extent is the client relationship important in the performance assessment of partners in a legal space, in your experience?
I think it is massively. In fairness, again, to most law firms, I just think that the concept of being client-centric and knowing their client and all of those things are it's the holy grail. I think the genuine challenge for many partnerships, I think, is the what is expected of a partner is a very long list. And I suspect that list is getting more unsustainable. And actually, perhaps what some businesses need to think about are partners focusing on certain things more than others. So there's a firm we do some work with, and they're very good on actually having some partners who have a higher degree of responsibility for generating work and less for delivering work. And I think just trying to think sensibly about what strengths and capacity do you need as a business, and actually just assuming that everybody can't deliver everything simultaneously because it's too long a list, I think is maybe a way forward, but massively important.
And Francesca, just picking up your point, I remember years ago at a firm, RIP Arthur Anderson, some of you may remember the name, they were very clear. They said that the partner only has two roles. One role is to go out and to get work, and the other role is to brief a manager to do the work, at which point you then free up time to go and bring in more work. Do you see that model, or is that kind of something that was people talked about 20 years ago, but reality was nobody else has really run with that particular agenda?
Well, I don't think anyone's ever gone quite as aggressively after it as Arthur Anderson did. But, until some rather unfortunate events, they actually did pretty well, didn't they? There is something really intriguing about the balance between experience and what do you do with your best people. And it's the old adage, someone's very good at winning work and working with clients, so you put them in a management role and stop them doing any of it. And the downside of that is you often end up with poor management levels and frustrated partners who really want to be with clients. And it reminds me of sort of one of those interesting challenges that you hear about. I know a firm, it was a small firm, it was a legal firm actually. And what they did was they completely inverted their management model. So they put all their experienced clients back with experienced partners back with clients. And they actually had some of their younger partners who were sort of definitely on the less experienced with client end of the spectrum and put them into the management roles. And the only thing they kept was the senior partner. But everything else they inverted, because they said the people who are best with clients are those who've got this great experience, and people learning the management tools will then become better with clients. And they actually did pretty well with it. Whether that will work with a larger organization, whether it was sustained over a period of time, I don't know. But I do think we need to challenge ourselves about the skill set of people, and why not play to people's strengths rather than ask them to work on all their development areas.
Yeah, and interesting if you take the US model where you have people at council, as they call it, which could be maybe 10 or 20 years older than their peers in this country, still actively at work in the office. And then actually, in a funny way, I always think that isn't actually a function of them. It's just that their peer group, in other words, their clients, the ones they grew up with, are still also in the same space. So if you have a country where everybody retires at 53, which is the average retirement age of a PwC partner, apparently, what are they going to do apart from going to Covent Garden and all the other good charitable things that lots of them engage in? So I think there is a sort of broader issue here around how you deploy people. But I think BDO is quite interesting, because one thing I have picked up from them is that absolutely picking up the model you described, saying, no, you are somebody who's really suited for management, a bit like fast track in a normal PLC. We will train you to be a great manager, managing partner if necessary. Your job is to run the business. And partners, your job is to go out and win work and then do an amazing work for the client. So I'm sure we'll pick this up at future sessions, because it's not something we really covered in any great depth. But I think that whole issue around roles and, not fitting round pegs into square holes, if you like, using the sort of kiddies analogy. So anyway, that's all very good stuff. So I think probably, unfortunately, we've come up to the end of our show today, which is a real shame. So I'd like to thank really interesting panel discussion today. I thought, sorry, Derek, if I took you out of your normal comfort zone and asked you about what law partners are up to, but as always, totally on the ball. So I'd like to thank Derek. I'd like to thank Bernard for reminding us, even if we're on Zoom, that actually the phone is really important. Yours truly is on the phone the whole time, believe me. Some of those who know me will know that. I'd like to thank Jeremy, and thank you as always for your honesty and helping us understand some of the things that are going on in the mind of the managing partner of a very good but typical mid-sized accountancy firm. And of course, Francesca, miss you next week. Not quite sure how we'll cope. I'm sure we will. But thank you again for giving us your ability to just pierce through all the stuff you've heard and give those 3 or 4. Here are the crown jewels. Here are the things that are really interesting. So thank you all for that. As you will probably know, we are now about to start our work, which is to get the videos out. The 2 slots will be out very shortly. Obviously the main thing will be up in the management library. And it only really remains for me to say, I hope you found today valuable, that, please encourage your peers to book for future episodes. We're here next week. And we will be back next Friday, hopefully. Well, I know exactly who's coming in next Friday. Let me have a quick check so I don't mislead you. Right, we've got Sally Jones, who is the trade partner of EY, talking a bit about international trade and what does that mean in terms of Brexit and where the professions can be going as one of the principal exporters from the country. We've got Claire Mason coming to talk about Women's Day and what does that mean in practice and what can we do about that. We've got Bruce Tether, who is the Professor of Innovation Management at Manchester Business School, talking a bit about how we all live in a pool of light. So we have to work with others in their pool of light in order to work together. Otherwise, we just end up with an ever narrower perspective of the present. And Eric Lynn, who's written some really interesting books about culture, coming to talk about his culture map and how that's something we can all adopt. So I think that should be a bit of fun. Sorry to miss, you'll miss all of that, Francesca, but we can pick it up. You can watch it on the video, as they say. And in the meantime, thank you again and look forward to a great audience. And thank you for completing the poll. I will be presenting it to the North American audience on Thursday at 5 o'clock UK time. So if you want to join, that's a free session. Do come along. Bye for now.